On this 20th day of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, we learned quite a bit more about Combs' ex-girlfriend, Jane. While she is testifying against Combs, he is still paying her rent. What's up with that? And after meeting with the defense team many, many times, she turned around and then started meeting with the prosecution something like 20 times. Also, what's up with that? I'm Sara Azari, and this is Serving Justice on NewsNation, where we are taking a deep dive into the trial against the music mogul Sean Diddy Combs on a daily basis. And with me today is friend of show, attorney Donte Mills, and fresh from the Manhattan courthouse is NewsNation field producer, our favorite Tommy Christaldi. Guys, thanks for joining me today on Serving Justice. I want to go to you first, Donte. Does the fact that Combs is still paying Jane's rent, right? It's like $10,000 a month, which is very pricey for LA. I'm in Angelina. Does that change how the jury might feel about her claims that essentially she was coerced into these hotel nights and these sex parties through the course of her 3-year relationship with Combs?
Absolutely. If the defense attorneys have their way, they're going to try to show that this was a choice, that it was a risk reward or a calculation of what do I have to put up with or what am I willing to put up with in order to get what I want out of this relationship. I think if we break this down in the most basic form, if I'm a defense attorney in there, I'm saying, listen, a relationship is a give and take.
Mm-hmm.
Some people in relationships want things from the other person that they may not be absolutely comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
but they make a decision on whether or not they're willing to put up with it for something they may get that their partner is not necessarily comfortable with. And I'm painting this as just an exchange where she knew he's a little freaky, right? He may ask me to do some things that I otherwise
Just a
wouldn't
little, just a little.
do. But I get some things out of this relationship that I've never gotten out of any other relationships, like $10,000 rent. So I'm willing to put up with it. And that's what the defense is going to try and put forward. And I think the fact that she's still willing to accept his money, although she's technically not in a relationship with him anymore, says a lot.
Well, I also think that it was brilliant strategy on behalf of the defense attorneys to advise him, which I'm sure it came from them, to continue paying rent because it looks less like you're paying for prostitution,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
sex, as opposed to we had a relationship. I promised to support her. I'm still supporting her, even
It's
though I
just
haven't
what I
seen her.
do. Yeah.
This is
It's
what I
not
do.
directly linked to anything. It's not
Correct.
like we had one of these hotel nights last week and that's the reason
Correct.
I'm giving her this money. No, it's just I take care of people that I appreciate, that I admire, that I love. And that's just who I am.
And
Right. Yeah,
it's
go ahead,
not
Tom.
just rent either.
Yeah,
He's paying for her lawyer, which I thought
right.
was absolutely crazy. I don't know if that's something that is more common than I
It
realized, but
is.
I was
Mhm.
well, okay.
Yeah. It
It is.
is because you don't want it to have the optics of influence, right? But if you're going through lawyers, teams of attorneys, you have a little bit more control over what this witness is going to do and
Sure.
say or how badly they're going to hurt you. Um, Although, this is also back to my previous question. It's interesting because it got really testy in there, Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
where it was, she got a Van Cleef Arpels necklace, she got a Bottega Veneta bag, she maybe even got a Chanel, though she denied it. And so her response was, well, what's the cost of my body?
Mhm.
To me, look, like Dante said, I think people sign up for certain types of relationships. She, in her own words, said, look, I like men who are providers and protectors. Okay, to me, this is what she was saying, providers. So look, there are women. I mean, can you imagine if this is a crime, how many men are criminals in this country who have this kind of polyamorous relationship where they're providing for rent or luxury goods or whatever in exchange for whatever,
And then Sarah, listen, can I push back and say, if that's a crime, can you then flip it and say women who are taking money from men who
or
really may
prostitutes.
not even like that man, or just sincerely, but he's providing for them, so they're there. Are they now committing a crime because
Correct.
they're accepting the money. I mean, it's
Correct.
a relationship, and there's always a give and take. There's some things you just put up with because you get things in exchange.
And you let your guards down, and your boundaries are gone. I mean, hello, like, people let down their boundaries, and for many different reasons. And I think the defense needs to argue that this was it might not be the relationship that you want or have been in or you condone or whatever, but it is a relationship, and it's not rare either. Like, a lot of people have this kind of, anyway, I mean, it's getting crazy. Tommy, the cross examination, I'm not there, you're there, and I'm just reading, but it seemed to get intense. Um, how would you categorize the defense's strategy with Tenny Garagos cross examining Jane compared to Cassie and Mia? Now, with Cassie, we handled her with care, right? And then Mia, I think it was Nicole Westmoreland who did the cross on Mia. No, who was it?
No, Mia was either Steele or Donaldson. I'd have to go
Right.
back to
Okay.
my I'd have
Okay.
to go back to my
So,
notes.
regardless, that all of these sort of accusers are being kind of handled with care. I mean, what are you seeing in the courtroom in terms of the strategy here?
Yeah, well, I think part of the reason why the outburst towards the end of the day over that bag that she didn't receive, and then what bag did she receive, and what is the price of my body, or whatever she said,
Yeah.
that took everybody aback because prior to that point, things had been very friendly. Jane had met with Kenny Garagos and Mark Agnifilo on a few different occasions back when this investigation first started and things were first going on, before she decided that she was going to stop meeting with them of her own volition and start cooperating with the government.
Mm.
So, I thought it was interesting. She was the first witness I can recall hearing who, when Tenny Garagos said, "Good morning, Jane," Jane responded, "Good morning, Miss Garagos." And even just that little bit of addressing her by name, it was clear that there was this existing relationship between
Yeah.
the two. And it was very much handled with care. I think also something that worked in the defense's favor is that Jane seemed very willing to testify about how much she loved
Mhm.
and still does love Sean Combs. I thought it was really interesting. There was a moment when Tenny was saying, "You liked to take care of him after these hotel nights." And Jane was adding in details. She liked to give him foot rubs. She liked to bathe him. These were things that I don't necessarily think we needed to hear. And I think the fact that she said them really
Yeah.
supports the defense.
Sarah, listen, you're a phenomenal attorney. You've seen the dichotomy. This is a special case where you have someone on one hand on video physically abusing someone, which is
Right.
horrific. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, someone who showed this kind of nurturing, compassion, protection, all of that to these people as well. And they're coming in here and they don't have this kind of just hatred for him. You can tell that there was a connection there. And that's going to be interesting to see how the jury reads into that. Listen, I've had
Yeah.
a case with this U.S. attorney before. I think he really knows what he's doing. But the way he's presenting this and using the people that Sean Combs was in a relationship with to establish this RICO charge, I think is wrong. He needs to
Yeah.
bring outside people because these people in a relationship, you can tell there's a special bond that is
Mhm.
not criminal activity. It's just like a weird bond. Some
Mhm.
people may say perverted, but there's a bond there for sure.
No, and speaking of this bond, Dante and Tommy, look, it to me, it's very clear that not only there's not hatred for him, there is almost like they feel bad that he's got these issues, the drug addiction, the sex addiction, and all these things. But it's like these women wanted to be number one in his life. And there's this common resentment that they have, that they ended up being side chicks specific to freak offs and hotel nights. I mean, they're all saying the same thing, that they didn't really like that he had this public relationship, that he would take so and so to Turks and Caicos or wherever it was, in Miami, whatever. But that they wanted to be that person, and it's almost like he had a caste system.
And part of
where
the
he had-
reason why they did it wasn't that they were, I guess, afraid of what he would do to them necessarily, but afraid that he would move on from them to
exactly,
somebody
they
who
didn't.
would be willing to do it.
Exactly, like they did they bet their boundaries, or they let their guards down in order to be able to stay with him. And it was like they knew he's polyamorous, and they said, didn't like it, but put up with it because I got to be with him. I got to spend time with him. I got to be in his orbit. Well, that's a choice.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a
and a choice
choice.
made because there is something that you're receiving that you want, that you prefer. So you're willing to put up with those kind of things, and that's why I think you're trying to. The prosecution is trying to base this case off of those type of relationships, and I think it's
Yeah,
going to be hard for the jury to say that's necessarily criminal behavior. I think they need
right.
to bring in other people from the outside, maybe whose job it was to get the drugs or to court the prostitute, whatever it was,
Yeah.
that didn't have that kind of personal relationship where it seemed more transactional, because then you can prove these charges.
Well, they tried with some, I don't remember now, it's become a blur, but Capricorn Clark maybe, some of the assistants, they tried, but there was like at least, Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was at least like one or two assistants who uh not only testified to supplying the baby oil and all the stuff and drugs, but also um that there was an assault on one or two of them, the women is who I'm talking about. There are a couple people that testify, but again, it's very disjointed, Dante. It's very disjointed. And if we're now going to criminalize this freaky guy who's a horrible man, who's a white beater and just disgusting, right? There are a lot of people that would be going down, right, on racketeering and sex trafficking in this country. To me, it's outrageous. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because so far I really haven't had anyone on that like really agrees with me on this. Okay. The judge threw out a motion for mistrial, but called the defense team's cross-examination of Brianna Bongolan, the woman that went with Bonna, a Perry Mason moment. It's a big compliment to the defense. Is it still a win for the defense despite losing the mistrial bid, Dante? What do you think?
No, I mean, you take what you can get, but I would
Yeah.
rather clearly a mistrial. If somebody comes in and says something that's clearly perjury, that's what they were saying, that she came in, she blatantly lied. The prosecutors knew she was lying, and still put that information in front of the jury. And the judge said, well, you're right, but you actually combated it pretty well. So I'm going to
Mm,
let it slide. I would
mm.
rather, the penalty of a mistrial, that's rare that you get that. But I guess as a secondary bonus card, you get the fact that you did have your moment. You were able to show that she was lying, and then have her say, well, maybe I had the dates wrong. But by that point, the damage is done to the prosecution, because now she lost pretty much all credibility, because she
Oh,
stood
she's
so
done.
firm. Yeah,
Yeah,
she stood
she's
so
done.
firm on that date, on
Yeah.
that time period, on those facts, and then you come in and blatantly she was wrong about something.
She was on drugs.
Really,
Her memory's unreliable, and she was blatantly. I mean, that was a big lie. It was not just an inconsistency. Everything was wrong about that
yeah.
testimony. So she's kind of done. But I also think it's also to set a record for appeal. Remember this team, this dream team, has an appellate lawyer. I think Alexandra Shapiro. She's an appellate lawyer. She's sitting there taking copious notes. She's the one that's making these motions for mistrial, etc., time and time again, and making the proper arguments because she's thinking like an appellate lawyer down the line.
Well, let me ask you,
What?
Sarah, did you not, when that happened, were you not thinking, how could the prosecution not vet this testimony and let her testify to this so adamantly when she was just flat out wrong? Like that,
Yeah.
it's a little bizarre to me, because
I don't know.
they just
Yeah,
knew.
here's my theory. I thought either she was just this wild card and they didn't expect her to go off the rail like this. I don't know, but they met with her. Didn't they met with her, Tommy, 27 times? Isn't she the one?
I think it was Mia that they met with 27 times.
Okay, but they met
They've met with a lot of the witnesses many times. I know that
many times. They met
Jane
with
said
her,
she met with them 24 times.
right?
So
And
But
they
that's
flouted this story of him hanging someone over the balcony. I mean, it's
right.
something that they
yeah.
talked about
But
often.
I think the other thing that I was saying here that night was that it could be because she was testifying to a lot of like racketeering criminal enterprise type of activity, right? And I thought maybe they're so desperate to set up this criminal enterprise on the racketeering charge that this is the best they got, because otherwise I would nix this person from my case because, excuse me, she shits all over the rest of my case
Yeah.
because she has no credibility. So I was wondering the same thing. I was like, she is so bad. Either she completely like flipped on them and they didn't know this was coming,
It
which is,
happens. It does happen. You just get a witness that just goes off the rail. Just they get on the stand and want to add some spice to it or something like that, and they throw in a fact there that you're sitting there thinking like, I've never heard that before. But they talked about these facts, and it was so blatant and so
yeah,
easy to contradict. I mean, they
yeah,
came in with the fact that he wasn't even in the city, I just think that was pretty
That's
sloppy.
crazy.
On
That was
Mary.
great. Like he's not even there. Like he
Yeah.
has an alibi. Like he's not even there. Tommy, Jane admitted to joining the relationship with Diddy despite him being polyamorous and publicly dating other women, which she clearly did not like, but she hung in there, right? Was there a sense in the courtroom that you got that this could possibly tarnish her credibility in some way? What was the juror's reaction?
So I was unfortunately in the overflow room again, and I didn't get to see the jury directly. But what I will say is that the vibe within the overflow room, at least that I have seen,
Mhm.
is that people do feel sorry for her. The argument that she's going with is, I started this relationship with this information. I didn't expect myself to fall in love with him the way that I did. And basically
Mm.
what she's saying is, by the time she realized this would be an issue for her, she was in too deep. I don't know how that impacts her credibility. I mean, I think that it definitely does go to the point that, okay, she's making a choice to be here. But I think that, you know, the focus really has been on just how clear. What I've observed is everybody's feeling sympathetic for the fact that she very obviously loved this guy. And she says she
Yeah,
still loves this guy. And I don't know if that sympathy is going to work in the prosecution's favor, or if the defense will be able to turn that and play that as, well, okay, you love him so much, you chose this for yourself. I
right.
don't know which way it'll go.
Right. You love this guy so much. You were a nourisher, that she calls herself
Yeah.
sort of a nourishing person, the foot rubs and all.
Mhm.
And you were willing to do whatever it took to please your man. Okay. I mean, at some point you gotta have a line between, this sort of idea that just because you're financially dependent, you're being coerced. No.
Yes.
Listen,
And
Dante,
that's
I said the other
something.
day,
Yeah.
Dante, I've been saying every day, my mama taught me there is no free lunch, right? I mean, you're taking money from a guy, $10,000 a month, $40,000 for the, 3 months security deposit, handbags and trips and things, a lifestyle that you didn't otherwise have, right? And gifts and whatever, probably some stuff for her kids. I mean,
There's going to be an exchange.
there's an
And
exchange.
legally, when we're talking about this, I think the distinction that's clear for when we're talking legally is if someone has some control over you, like they're your employer or something like
Yes,
that, then there's this sense of maybe you didn't have a choice because you can't
correct.
lose your
You would
job,
lose your
right?
job. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
when you're deciding to be in a relationship, that's a little different because
Right.
you can walk away. And that
Or
was my thing, even
or
with
you lose your relationship. You don't do the freak offs. He dumps you, and then okay, you got to go find a new man, a new provider.
but
It's
there's no
hard work.
obligation that he does that because it's just a romantic
Yeah.
relationship. He's not your employer or anything like that. But that's the thing. Even when you talk about the testimony from Cassie, she was in another relationship. So how
Yeah.
can you say, oh, he forced me to be here? But then you're in a relationship with Kid Cudi. You
You're
had that
free to
choice
see
to
other men. Yeah, you're free.
absolutely.
Yeah, you're free to see other men. You're free to do other projects. She went to Africa to do a film. That ain't got nothing to do with Diddy. you
Yeah.
know, she was, and when we're talking about Diddy, he gave her a lot of opportunities. She was that Carrie Morgan testified. She was in studios days and weeks recording with artists that he set her up with. So how detrimental was he
Yeah.
really to your career? And then this one saying, "Oh, I stopped influencing, or my influencer job took a nosedive because I was just my job became these freak offs." Well, you could have cut it off. Trust me,
Absolutely.
he clearly did not have a problem finding a chick to do freak offs with. Obviously,
I,
you know.
I
And you wanted it to be you, so you decided to do certain
Yeah,
things that you normally wouldn't do. But again, legally, we're talking about that distinction of someone truly having control over you,
yeah.
or you acknowledging or doing some things you wouldn't otherwise because you want certain benefit. That's what the jury is going to have to weigh here.
I
I
kept
mean,
waiting for.
yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead, Tommy.
I kept waiting for her today to explicitly say something like, I felt like I was an employee for him, something like that. I know that she's previously said that this felt like a job for her, but I was waiting for her to really make it overt. And the closest that I think we got was there was a moment when she said that she didn't know the terms and conditions of the relationship that she was getting into. And that was the closest to like contract speak, so to speak. And I didn't think that it worked all that well. I think
It's
It
that
did.
interesting because some of the testimony that we heard, even the text or the message from him from Sean Combs where he said, I do my job, you got to do your job. It wasn't about employment. He's saying, I
Right.
show up for you, you got to show up for me. So that's
Correct.
lingo, that's lingo that was used that doesn't necessarily establish there was no employer
No.
relationship.
Yeah.
It was really,
It's that your
I'm
job
here for
in
you,
this
you're here for me.
relationship.
Right. And on the topic of texts, the other thing that I thought was unfortunate for the prosecution today was that so many times during the cross-examination, we were presented with these texts where Diddy says, essentially, talk dirty to me, and she does. She says
Yeah.
these things. What do you want? And she answers. And she kept trying to say throughout the cross-examination, you don't understand. I was only saying these things because I knew they're what he wanted to hear, but that's not in the messages. And what
Right.
the jury is going to take back to look at
Yeah.
are the messages. And what's in the
Yeah.
messages is him saying, say something, and her saying it.
And listen, I'll
Right.
tell you, I say things I think my wife wants to hear, right? It's not that. It's not
Sure.
that. Just everybody calm down for a second. It's not that. But that's what we do when we're in a relationship.
Right.
We meet the other person where they are. And
Right.
that's the decision you make. And you can't then at the end of that relationship say, you know what? I changed myself a
1000%.
little bit for this other person. So that means I was forced to do it. Because it's a lie.
1000%. And let me tell you, as a woman, this is, I'm offended by this, right? Because I'm for any movement that gives a voice to women who have been oppressed and taken advantage of and assaulted and all of those things. But I draw the line where we're going to eviscerate due process and someone's constitutional rights at the expense of a resentful, regretful woman with buyer's remorse. Okay. You made a choice. There's accountability. I mean, if we want to be equal, right, which is what this movement is about, we want equality, we want respect, then we got to be accountable for our choices, and you make a choice. Like, I made some bad choices in my life too, including in my relationships, but I don't turn around and call the bad man a rapist or
Yeah,
a
so I was
trafficker.
made to do that. I felt like I had no choice. No, we're all, if we are, you're absolutely right, sir. If we're equal in this, I have desires and wants, and you can either meet them or not.
Yeah.
And our relationship may last or not because of that, but both sides are making a choice in that situation.
Yeah. So, Dante, I want to close with this. How do you think the defense is doing so far? And they're putting in 2 weeks of witnesses. That's interesting to me. So it's not just about cross-examination and poking holes. Where do you think this is going to lead?
I can tell you this. I don't know if they're going to put in 2 weeks of witnesses. I wouldn't. It's interesting that the U.S. attorney's case is going to be shorter than they anticipated. I don't think it's because they've done all they need to do. I think they're running out of steam and things that they thought they were going to be able to present, they haven't been able to. So if I was the defendant on this side, I would be kind of bringing my case, reeling it in, and not giving them additional fodder where they can score some points that they haven't already done that, because I don't think they've met their burden yet. So
No, not
if I'm
yet.
on the
No.
defense side, I'm kind of shrinking my case and saying, guys, that's it. Like, they haven't done it. Let's
Yeah.
get out of here. And I think that they would be in a better position if they did that.
I mean, yeah. Tommy, you got to keep us posted on this. Obviously, we're on this every day, and you have
Absolutely.
really great insight. Dante, it was wonderful speaking to you. This was a great
Always, sir.
conversation.
Always.
Please come back and join us, because this is going to go on for a while, and I really want to get your take, especially when the defense starts putting on their case. Thank you guys for joining me today. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Please stay with Serving Justice. We are here daily breaking it down, and also News Nation in general. This is a topic and trial that we're covering extensively. We will be back tomorrow with more on the Diddy trial.